Hi everyone, and welcome to our first Real Talk live sessions here at BISA. Before we start today, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the many lands that we are meeting on today. We are all personally standing on Darug land today in Blacktown, and I pay my respects to the elders past, present and future. And I also acknowledge with respect Aboriginal friends and colleagues that are here with us today. So for those of you who have been following BISA for a while now, you would have been seeing our social media posts and some movements by young people, for young people. And one of those is Real Talk sessions. And today we are going to be talking about youth-led solutions, which was the topic of our first Real Talk. And our plan is to have a series of the Real Talk sessions plus a series of live sessions where our panelists can talk about what it means to them and the topic of conversation. So today I'm joined by Alison Beecroft, who is a fellow youth practitioner here at BISA, and Kanan Prasad, who is one of our young leaders. So welcome, guys, to our first Real Talk session. And everyone's a little bit nervous, but we're going to wing this. We haven't done this before, so it's our first one. So we apologise for, our infancy in doing this. So I guess to start off, maybe I'll just hand it over to you, Alison, and we can talk about Real Talk. What is it? Why? How did we come up with that idea? Why is that important? And what is the plan or the future of Real Talk?
So essentially what Real Talk is it's a series of short, insights into the experiences of young people living in Western Sydney. Essentially it is what its title says, and it's young people talking about real experiences, real facts, and just providing an insight that is often not told or it's censored. Young people that we work with or from Western Sydney are often silenced due to their circumstances, and it's really important that they are heard, and they're heard on a platform that can affect change.
And I guess one of the things for us, for those of you who don't know, we hear it every day. So we are constantly hearing what young people want, what they need, what the issues are, and it's almost instantaneous as well. They're at our doorstep all the time. And Kanan, you've been around BISA for a while now.
Yeah, for a while.
And I guess, the difference between kind of what happens out on the street and what people talk about, I guess, in the sector. You sitting on, different committees and things like that. What does Real Talk mean for young people?
I think Real Talk means for young people that they're able to actually talk about their experiences and talk about some of the stuff that normal people don't know, and a lot of stuff that social media doesn't tend to, promote or really expose, as it is hidden. It is not exposed as it should be, and a lot of people don't know these kids' real stories and what they have to offer.
Yeah, and I think we're hoping that Real Talk can really create that platform, particularly for the young people who don't get a chance to talk about these issues, or that are often censored, or sometimes they're just glossed over. And so we see that a lot in the sector and in decision making, that we might be talking about a particular issue, but on the ground it looks very, very different. And so if we can, provide that platform for young people to be raw, to be real, to be honest, and to be really truthful, I think that's a really good start. So our first session last week was youth-led solutions, and I guess the decision to talk about the youth-led solutions was something that, BISA has been transforming. We've been on this journey, again, for those of you who have been following, really to transform to this youth-led practice that I myself am passionate about, I know Alison's passionate about, and obviously all our young leaders in the space are passionate about. So do you want to talk a little bit, for you, what is your experience working with young people? How did you start? How did you get into this? And what are some of the roles that you've had?
Yeah, so I've been working with young people across the Western Sydney region in varied roles for the past 8 years. And I started off in working in residential care, so working with young people who are experiencing homelessness. Quite early on, I recognised the importance of young people having a voice, and when young people don't have a voice, things don't change for them, and the services and support that are provided to them are not relevant or meaningful or of what they exactly need. I then moved on to working as a caseworker with young people and their families. And again, this just further reinforced, what's going on in our sector, and how there's so many gaps, there's so many creators for young people, and their voices are just not being heard, and our sector just isn't responding in the way that needs to respond. I know that there's some fantastic services out there. However, for our most vulnerable young people, and we see it here every day at BISA, our vulnerable young people are, falling through the craters in our system, and they're heading down a path that is really, really scary. And I no longer want to see young people go down those paths anymore. It's not good enough that the only options for young people is for them to go to jail, to end up in our mental health system, or to be set 6 foot under. It's just not good enough.
And I guess, that passion that you have and working in those diverse, I guess, fields within the sector, because there's different, avenues in the sector, has led you to form that belief that, youth-led is the solution, or as you said in your video, the only solution. What is there like a catalyst, like was there something like that happened, or has something ever happened, and I'm sure there's many things that have happened, where you just went, do you know what, like that is the answer? Like what really cemented it for you to say that's the answer?
I think that there's been so many moments, but a few of the moments that really stand out for me is probably being in those moments where young people are helpless, they're going to jail, or they're sitting at the grave of their baby, like after losing their baby. Like it's in those moments that for me stood out, because how could anyone understand that experience unless they've lived that themselves? How could anyone tell us what needs to happen or how we need to respond if they haven't experienced that? And so it was in those moments that, and in all the moments that I've worked with young people, that they've been my greatest mentors. And I believe that, we need to be fostering. We need to be fostering that. We need to be fostering young people's voices. We need to allow young people to have a voice. We need to allow them to guide our decision-making processes. And we need young people in the forefront, because they relate, they connect, they've lived that, and young people feel more at ease with young people that have lived through that.
Oh, 100%. And we all know that, you have to be able to relate to young people, and, who's best to relate to young people than young people themselves. I think as well, when we're talking about that youth-led, that even for BISA, we talk about it, we're still not the experts. We feel like we're onto something, we have this really great solution, but we're not doing it the best either. And obviously there's a lot of constraints, and in the sector as well, there's a lot of constraints. I know we talk about youth-led, people try their best, but genuinely at the core of it, are we really doing youth-led when we're being dictated, by particular processes or decisions to say you must do X, Y, and Z, and you must tick X, Y, and Z box. And, for BISA, how many years did we spend with this, funding all this, like a contract that says, you have to do X, Y, and Z, and then you have thousands of young people every year going, but that's not what we want, and that's what we need, and we have to say, well, we're trying our best, and you're stretching it, and it kind of never really goes there. And I guess, Kanan, you were around, I guess, as BISA's transition, you've been around in both senses,
Yeah.
So you've been around when it's, we're prescribing to young people, these are the outcomes that we need to meet, as opposed to the last maybe 18 months where we're going, okay, cool, you guys lead now.
Yeah.
What was that shift? Well, how did that look for you?
Okay, so for those who don't know, I'm the current producer here, and I used to come here in 2017 to record my own songs. So 2017, when I was coming, I think that's when the other manager was here, and I think she had a lot of government-led projects she had to meet, and those standards you talked about before, she had to meet those standards. So I don't think she was able to meet, or whoever was there, that management wasn't able to meet the full requirements that the community needed and the young people needed. However, I think last year...
And what did that feel like, though? So obviously you're coming here because you're passionate about music.
Yeah.
You want something from the community, or you want a service to be available to you. How does that feel when you want something and you know that it's needed, but then it's not being given to you?
Well, it is a bit irritating because you do realize that this can benefit you and other young people who are in the same situation or have the same passion as me. Example for me was doing music, so a lot of other young people in Blacktown or Western Sydney want to do music, and the fact that maybe we can't use a certain studio which is meant to be for us, it's a little bit irritating as well. And I feel like not me, but a lot of other kids I've seen, it just kind of drives them away. And they end up doing stuff that we don't want them to do, which doesn't really feed back to the economy or society very well. So.
And then kind of defeats the whole purpose.
And it kind of defeats the purpose of
if you're a youth center that's deterring young people, then what's the point? Yeah, like it's kind of So then I guess on the flip side, you've been heavily, right from the beginning. I think you were one of our day ones when, I came, Alison and myself came to you and went, all right, this is the situation we're in. Like we don't really know what we're doing, but like, what do you think that we should be doing?
Yeah.
What does that look like from? I guess how has that shifted for you? Yeah, well, I guess from like the end of last year,
last year, a lot of young people were coming and using the studio, and I was working with them, and I used it as like a networking opportunity for me. But I think at the start of this year, when we started to implement a bit more some projects around it, that really engaged them a lot more because they felt more connected, and because it was youth led, they felt it was for them by them, and because of that, they felt more not entitled, but more inclined to like be involved and actually come and help out or be involved in the space. So yeah, that's my experience with it.
And sitting in the studio, because the studio is probably, I would say it's the most popular program that we have here at BISA. It always has been. We know that in Western Sydney, music plays a huge role in youth culture. Especially now. I mean, but it always kind of has. But I think the studio itself has probably been the most popular program. And the types of young people that access the studio, we would say probably are most at risk or are most vulnerable.
Yeah.
From your perspective, because you've worked, now you're leading the studio project and you're producing and you're actually running those projects.
Yeah.
How have you seen the change for young people, like, allowing them to access the space in the studio how they want? What are some of the things that you've seen beneficial to young people when they lead?
So for me, I think it's a great expression just in general, them able to talk about their experiences, even if it's just not about the experiences, but just do something creative, and it gives them that outlet. It keeps them off the streets. It keeps them not with other people that might bring them down, stuff like that, not in the wrong crowd, but it really puts them on the right path. Plus, I think it's a really good way to bring them up creatively as well. And a lot of them, like Will Spacely, he used to use this studio, and now he's somewhat blown up. He's making a living off music and stuff, which is awesome. And a lot of young people kind of see that as like an achievement or something that's doable. And I think the access to studio has really given that drive and motivation, and it just gives them an opportunity just to be them and really express themselves and who they are.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, that you can't be what you can't see.
Exactly.
So, young people often feel like there's no way out, especially living in Western Sydney. And, when you are at risk or vulnerable and you're churning through these systems, there's always that almost sense of defeat, I feel. So, like, if there's opportunities where young people are really succeeding and you can look up to that, then things can kind of change. But you need young people in those leadership positions, right? They need to be able to lead. You can't be a young leader if you don't see people leading.
Yeah.
And prior to BISA, you were part of the Youth Advisory Council, which is another really important role, which most councils have, which allows young people to speak. So how did you become a leader? What inspired you to be part of that?
So basically, I used to be involved in the Burbs Festival. So my parents and the church I used to be with, they used to be involved in the Burbs Festival. And I guess I haven't gone for about 10 years, because I was 7 back in the day. And I thought I want to get back involved, get back to the community somehow. So I applied to help out, and then I found out the Youth Advisory Committee and what they do. So I decided to jump on board with them. Met some great like-minded kids like me, and I just connected with them. It's really cool because you get to see how the community works, what's actually happening behind the scenes, be involved in some of the festivals, really give like a youth perspective onto things, which is great. And there's a lot of perks, like you meet some cool people, big people as well, like politicians and stuff, so you build that connection, build that rapport. And ultimately you're able to like really give back to the community that way. And through the advisory community, that's how I actually found about it with BISA. And that's when I started recording my own music and stuff, and then everything goes from there.
It just happened. And Ben, like, there's so much research, right? So everyone, youth-led is not anything new. When we talk about, I feel like when I talk about youth-led and we're talking about this in the sector, or we're talking about it with other people, it's nothing innovative or new or something that people should be like, wow, and often we do get that response. There's so much research, there's so many reports, we all know the benefits. We're fortunate enough to see those benefits firsthand because we're on the ground. From your perspective, what do you what are some of the benefits that you've seen by this transition of really allowing young people to lead? What are some of the shifts that you've seen either in individuals or in communities?
Oh, I've seen so many benefits, both individually and within the communities. I guess on an individual level, I have seen young people who, have just come out of jail and they've, felt like the world is against them and that, they've been demonized by society because they have been involved in crime. And I've seen such a transformation. Like one young person in particular comes to mind where, he has just transformed entirely as a person by giving him a little sense of, responsibility, and allowing him to have that self-determination and be able to, I guess, contribute his ideas and his solutions. He has been one of our most instrumental young men throughout this process, and we've seen massive transformations from a young person who came in and was, emotional and distressed and in crisis day in, day out, to a young person who's happy and singing down the hallways and excited to be here and to be able to lead and to guide other young people. That in itself, screams the successes of why young people need to be leading and why even our most vulnerable young people, and particularly our most vulnerable young people, need to be given these opportunities. It's so amazing. I guess in the community, just also seeing all the young people that come in and being able to, they're so excited to see that young person and they go directly to him, and usually he then comes to me or you and and goes, hey, check in on such and such because they're they might need some help with court support or whatever it is. But yeah, those relationships and that impact that young person has made is incredible. But where else?
Yeah,
I don't know where else.
And the impact, that's a really interesting thing, right? Because when we look at I guess government funding and the way that works, and any type of funding that comes through, you need to prove this impact. How do you prove the life that you've saved? Like, how can you actually prove that? And I know for me and for you as well, you've worked in the sector a really long time. You've had long-term relationships with young people. For me, sitting at BISA for such a long period of time, I've had the privilege of seeing that long-term impact. And so, 5 or 6 years down the track, when a young person comes and says, hey, Nat, I'm good now, and, BISA saved my life, I'm like, that's amazing. What do I do? Do I call up, the funder and say, hey, 6 years ago, we worked with this young person, we did some really amazing work, and it's really, really hard to measure. And so I guess that's probably one of the barriers of, how do you really demonstrate this? And I think the other really important thing that you mentioned is young people who are vulnerable and at risk leading. And the reason that I bring that up is because I've had a comment made to me like, Nat, as if a homeless young person cares about what's happening at BISA, as if they care about this, fantastic model that you've developed.
I think that sorry to interrupt, but I think that they care the most.
Absolutely.
They're the young people's lives in which are being transformed. They've got a space where they've never had a space or a family or somebody that cares about them or that genuinely gives them these opportunities and says, I believe in you.
Yeah, 100%.
Most of our young people have never experienced that. And so...
Yeah. But also, don't you think that comment comes from such a welfare mentality? It's like, when we look at those young people, especially our vulnerable and at-risk young people, generally we look at what is wrong and where the deficit is. And if we constantly look at the deficits of young people, we're never going to give them the opportunities to really showcase their assets. And there's just as many assets as there are deficits.
Absolutely.
And so, a homeless young person, to us, we don't look at them as homeless first and foremost. And I think the beauty of the model, this youth-led model that we've been developing, is really about it's a young person first and foremost. And then we intersect that with everything else that's going on, whether that's, an issue, whether it's a need, whether it's a want, whether it's a cultural, whatever that is, we then intersect that. So, yeah, there is that importance of the unusual suspects, what we like to call them. And I know, Kanan, you sit on advisory committees, but often, there is a general kind of feel that young people who sit on advisory committees are often very different to young people who are on the ground. And, I mean, you would see that. How many of the young people that come through BISA do you think would participate in a youth advisory committee?
Yeah, obviously I wouldn't say it's the exact same kids. However, the ones who are in the community, they're not that sheltered from what happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
So they definitely have something to contribute. Yeah.
But however, I think the ones who are in the community, they do have a bit of like understanding of how I guess politics work.
Yeah,
or
yeah.
they're interested in it. However, I know some kids in the community and other communities and stuff, and they act just like some of the kids who just come to here.
Yeah.
But obviously they're a bit not to put anyone down, but a bit more mature enough to be able to give in to the committee and give their perspective and stuff, and because they're interested in that kind of stuff, or they see themselves doing something similar in the future. So that's why they were kind of involved in that. But I definitely think that the kids, they are different. However, they do understand what happens, and they do have a first-hand or at least second-hand experience of what happens, I guess.
And I guess the interest in politics is interesting as well, right? Because we know young people often, don't really understand how like politics work, and we have this conversation. This is where we're educating our young people as well, particularly young people that come through our doors who are really frustrated, who are in crisis and who need support, and we're trying to explain to them, this political system, because the youth sector is embedded in a political system as well, and that plays a huge role in so many different facets in terms of funding and access and service and all of those things.
It's also ultimately like
the decision making,
their lives the most. Particularly around obviously what's being invested in, where it's being invested. Even around Centrelink and access to Centrelink, the courts, things like that. All of those are policy and legislation, and all those decisions are made usually within a political sphere. But for a lot of our young people, they're not necessarily given that opportunity to, or because of the experiences that they're going through, they're not. They're not either given the opportunity, or it's not accessible for them to be able to actually have a voice around those particular topics, even though it's affecting them the most.
Yeah. And how many times have you heard those comments from young people like, I didn't vote, or I did a donkey vote, and it doesn't affect me, and I don't really care about that. It's because they don't understand that impact. And then in the next sentence they're talking about, their frustration with Centrelink and not really understanding that connection between, well, your vote matters because of those decisions.
Absolutely.
I want to talk about, I suppose, now that we're talking in regards to, the political sphere, if for lack of a better word, I think one of the challenges that we face as a sector or for our young people is how can we influence that? How can we use what we do here as a way to influence that to help improve their lives? Because we've seen, we just have to look at our juvenile justice system. We just have to look at child protection system. We just have to open the doors here at BISA and see how many young people are churning in that. What do you think? What's your, what's your ultimate vision for how can these young people influence politics?
Ultimately, I believe that politicians need to be here. They need to sit with these young people. They need to hear the stories that you and I hear every single day. And I'm not going to say that politicians don't have an interest. I think that they genuinely do. But for so many reasons, being able to actually get to speak to politicians and be able to influence policies, it's just, there's no conduit for young people. So ultimately, my ultimate vision would be for politicians to come into this space and to be able to have a raw and unfiltered conversation with young people and to hear their stories. And secondary to that, I suppose, is transforming our sector to really supporting and amplifying young people's voices and ensuring that at every table, whether it's an interagency meeting, whether it's they're talking about a specific issue that's happened within the community, whether that's council, whoever it is, where decisions are being made or conversations are taking place about young people and their communities. I want to see young people, all types of young people with all lived experiences, with representing all different identities at that table, because only then can we say that we are truly listening to young people and young people are truly guiding our policies and, yeah, our future, I suppose, as well.
So then what would you say to the people that go, well, young people have nothing to contribute? Like, what are they have nothing to contribute. What is the benefit of them sitting at the table? There's a term that we don't ever talk about in our sector, and I don't even know if it's a big term here in Australia. I know it's big in America, which is adultism. And adultism is basically that adults know best, they make the decisions. We see that happen all the time. Like that's what happens all the time. So, when people think and believe like that, generally they think, well, what does a young person have to offer? So realistically, like, what does a young person have to offer?
Young people have everything to offer. They're not only our future, they're our now. They are creative, they are innovative, and they are able to create solutions to issues that have been existing for so long, and our communities and our sector and our government just don't have the answers. So young people have everything to offer. And like they can create the solutions, they can I don't know, like they're just creative.
So one of our young people, and I can ask you, Kanan, because you would say as well, there's complex social problems. Yeah, we all know this. Everyone has different opinions of why they exist and if they can be solved. But do you genuinely believe, like, what do you think would happen if every adult like vacated their seat and said, like, here's a problem, we don't know how to solve it? Like, do you believe that young people can solve it? Do you think young people have something different that we don't have, different perspective?
I feel like a different perspective is a big thing, because young people are obviously very concerned about their future, as we're still young. So we still have a good 40, 50 years ahead of us. And we want that to be the best for us and I guess our future generations and stuff. So I think we are capable of stuff. However, we do need guidance of stuff, obviously, because we're still technically kids. I feel like being a young person is one of the weirdest ages, because like you're kind of mature, but you still need to like get your mom to sign a permission slip to go to excursions and stuff, So, but yeah, I think to answer your question, I think we can. I think it's possible, and we do have that capacity to do so. However, with the right guidance, who knows what we can do.
100%. And that's the conversation around allies, yeah? So another, I guess, element of what we've been doing at BISA and the work that we're talking about in our practice is we're learning through this as well. So we've operated a certain way that most organisations have operated for a really long time. And then all of a sudden we've done this complete shift and said, no, we're going to shake it up, we're going to do a new model. And, it's youth-led. Youth-led is the model. And we've also learned that it's not about just handing it over to young people and going, here you go, guys, go for gold. That it doesn't work. That's setting young people up to fail as well. And
it's putting a lot of responsibility on young people as well.
Yeah, and a crucial element of that then is our model is about young people and their allies. So it's not, when we're talking about youth-led, because I think that scares people a little bit. People are like, what do you mean let young people lead? And I don't mean just give them $1 million and let them run with it. It's about the decisions, like what elements do young people lead and make a decision, and what elements is there an ally that's supporting the young person? So, for example, with the music program, I can't just say to you, hey, Kanan, go run this program, go lead it. Yeah. It's not going to work. Like, I'm going to set you up to fail. You're going to do the absolute best that you can, but it's probably not going to meet, the outcomes or
whatever I need to meet, the guidelines.
Yeah, the guidelines that you need to meet. And so I think that's really important. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit around, I guess, our understanding of, why allies and youth practitioners, where do they come into this? Because that's for people that are out there that are watching going, oh, we really want to do youth-led, but we're kind of scared because that means I don't have a job anymore. And that's not what we're saying. So do you want to talk a little bit around where do the youth practitioners fit and what's their role, and how do we decide, whose role's what?
100%. So I guess in our model, we pair young people with lived experience, so our young leaders, with youth practitioners, and we work alongside each other. And the reason that we do that is that young people have so much to offer, and they do need to be obviously given the platform to be able to lead and create projects and initiatives. But there also needs to be support for that young leader to be able to to be able to respond to the needs of the young people that are accessing that project. So it's not placing expectation on the young leaders to do that higher level advocacy and youth work like stuff. It's about the practitioner taking on that level of responsibility, but allowing the young person to really, lead and deliver the projects or the vision that they have for that particular project. It's also about creating consistency. So, there are things that are going on in our young leaders' lives, and particularly when we're working with young people that are living risk, we need to ensure that we are understanding and responsive to the different evolving things that are happening in their lives, and that we remain consistent for the young people that are accessing that project or that service that the young person is also leading. So I guess throughout this process, that's been a really big learning curve for us. It's about being realistic around what level of responsibility do we need to be holding still as youth practitioners to ensure that we're not setting those young people up to fail.
And also this practice of what we're talking about, or the model that we've been testing, for the last 18 months, in a way, it actually challenges youth work in general, right? It challenges everything that we've ever known, everything that we've been taught, around youth work. And I get that that's scary, because change is scary for everyone, and we get comfortable with the things that we know. This has been a very, very uncomfortable journey. We know this. We've sat here every day going, how many days have we got? Oh my God, what the hell are we doing? Where do we go here? And then obviously we always bring it back to the young people and go, okay, what do you want from us now? But I think when we're talking about youth practitioner, that's even a different word. Yeah, we always talk about you're a youth worker, and job titles have been really important, and we've been discussing that with young people as well. What does our role look like? And I guess they're the things when we talk about youth led. It's how many decisions within your organisation are really truly led by young people. And we often refer to the Heart's ladder of participation, principles of participation, to kind of see, where do certain things fit, and we try to be at the top of the ladder as most as we can. But generally, the sector kind of sits at that bottom end because of the constraints that are placed upon them. And so even when you're really passionate or you want to do more, sometimes it's just really hard. But does this challenge, is this the start to really shaking up something that, I don't know, doesn't need to exist anymore? And Kanan, I don't know, what's your perspective of, the youth sector where the traditional model is you train, workers, and they come and run programs for young people, and they might ask young people to participate in different ways. Is that what the youth sector should be, or should it be something completely different?
I feel like that's a good idea if you don't know what you're doing. It's a very basic way of approaching a need or a problem. But I think what we're doing now with getting young people to lead, because they feel more comfortable with someone like me, and a lot of the kids that I'm running in my project, I am generally friends with them, or I generally get along with them pretty well, so they feel more inclined to help out. They'll show up a bit more frequently. They'll be more inclined to be involved and participate in the activities that I run, and I ultimately feel like that gets them maximum engagement from them. So I feel like having youth, people like me leading these projects, really allows them to feel more connected to the space and just as a whole, and therefore those people who need help, they're more inclined to ask us or ask you for help, or talk to me or whatever. So answer your question, no, I don't think bringing a leader who's been trained from somewhere or outside of the business, or sorry, outside of BISA, just to bring him in actually helps. It can help to a degree, obviously, if we need it desperately, yeah, sure, but ultimately, I think it's too liable.
And so it's really starting with young people. And just going, this is, what do you want? What do you need? And then working it out. Yeah.
And then from there's that way they have their input. Therefore, they know what they're getting. And then, because obviously they have their needs and they know what needs they'll need. Or if not, we can help them out, and that way we can work together with it. But if you just bring in someone who they don't know, they're not comfortable with, they might never start coming, So yeah, so
And the other thing that I think we also, I mean, we're still working on as well is the hardest thing with youth led is what happens when young people are asking for something that you just can't provide. Yeah, like that we call that, I call it the Dear Santa complex, where we're constantly consulting with young people. What is it that you want? What do you need? What do you want? What do you need? And young people tell everyone all this, like everyone knows if you have to consult about, a topic, an issue that's been around for the last 10 years, you already know what young people are going to say. There's that juggle around how do you give them what they want and what they need? Like we're talking about youth led. Can young people lead everything? They can't. But how do we determine those things that they should be leading?
Okay. I feel like with that,
like how many times have young people come here and gone, oh, Nat, like, what we need is this, this, and this, and we're like, yeah, we would love to have that, but like resources don't allow us to do that, or like, so how do you manage that? How can we manage that?
I feel that's coming to a compromise. So if they say, oh, we need more studio time, then we might create an extra day where we have 7 hours where they can come in. So just compromising like that, not being open 24/7, obviously that's not possible, but still compromising, being open maybe an extra day or an extra few hours. So working with them to find what they really need. If it's them wanting to, like, I don't know, get a new setup, it's talking to you about what could be a good setup, what's the equipment we could get, blah blah, this that. Talk to JT and stuff about what we actually need, stuff like that. But I just think it's compromising because they understand that we can't get like a semi-level studio example.
Oh yeah,
which, no, yeah. One day, yeah.
We're manifesting now.
Yeah,
exactly. But realistically, like we can't get that overnight, and that's not something they just have to accept because that's not possible. However, we have decent equipment, we have decent programs, we have decent equipment and this that. So we have stuff that they can use and stuff that they can utilize. So therefore, we are meeting their needs. However, it is realistic. And we are compromising with them to try and trying to come up with the best result for them and how we can benefit them in the best way possible.
And also it's about empowering them and supporting them and resourcing them to help get that. How many times have you heard me say, well, that's what you want, what are you going to do to help us out? And that's where that youth led really started. Definitely. In terms of I guess really for the studio as well, right? When I said, like when you're like, oh, we want the studio to be open, and I'm going, I've got no funding to open the studio, and then you go, well, I want to volunteer and I want to open the studio because I know that it's important, and then we started to put those practices and those frameworks to support you to be able to do that.
Yeah.
I think as well, it's an opportunity to really teach or show or give young people insight into the processes of applying for grants and the inner workings or the steps around how to achieve what it is that they want to achieve, whether that's revamping the studio or whatever it is. It's about actually allowing young people to have that insight around what are those processes and how can they be part of those processes as well.
Yeah, and that goes back to the politics around through this process we're able to explain to young people how certain things work, that funding just doesn't land on your doorstep, that there's a process that you need to go through. And also I think what's important is really to teach young people that their voices are missing in that process and giving them the tools and resources so they can fill that gap, because we know young people are never ever consulted with in terms of funding decisions. So we can write all the applications that we want in the world, but who sits on the other end to determine whether or not that funding goes to where young people want or need? And so, that whole youth-led movement is, yes, we want to start on the ground and we want to get young people leading that direct service delivery, for lack of a better word, but then ultimately what we want them to be is to be sitting at those tables and making those decisions for our community. And
I mean, the ultimate vision would be for those sitting on the panel that are making those decisions to be young people that have lived through those experiences that that funding is going to target or to address. So ultimately that would be the dream. But yeah, it definitely starts with educating young people around those processes and giving them the resources to be able to advocate to those bodies to ensure that their voices are being heard and that they are, I guess, aware of where that funding is actually going if it's not allocated to their project and why.
And getting access to those opportunities is another really important part of that, because it's hard to get young people access to those opportunities. I want to talk a little bit around people that are out there that might be watching going, that's really cool. Like, you guys letting young people lead, that's exciting, that's interesting. Do you want to talk through a little bit around, I don't know, where to start? Like, how do you start? If there's someone out there that's working with young people that sees this and says, oh, that's really cool, I want to do that. What would you say their starting point needs to be?
I guess there's a couple of points. First and foremost, it's ensuring that we are hearing young people. We are genuinely hearing young people. We can listen, but are we actually hearing? Second of all, it's about looking at your organization and looking at the processes around, is your organization specific for young people? Are young people at the center of what you do? Or are you a community-based organization where, the youth element or youth development arm of your organization is only one part or one component? And how can you start to facilitate the conversations between yourself and your team or your management to ask those questions? How are young people's voices actually being heard? Are we creating those platforms? Do they exist? And if not, why? So I think it's starting to ask those questions. Secondly to that, I would encourage you to actually be the conduit, so to facilitate some discussion between those young people and your management, particularly I suppose for large organizations. Often young people aren't necessarily, because they may be working in so many different locations across the nation sometimes, that the young people in each region have different ideas, different needs, different gaps. And so how can we ensure that the young people in each of those areas are having a voice at the top? Secondly, or thirdly, I think it would be my point, is ensuring that, I guess, in those processes that you have a clear pathway around your next step. So once you've facilitated those conversations between young people and management, how do we then hold management or people in positions of power accountable to ensure that they not only hear those voices, but they actually put the recommendations into action? And then how do they then, I guess, advise their funding body, or how do they start to facilitate those conversations between the young people that are accessing their services, but also the young people that aren't accessing their services? And we talk about that here around, it's great to talk to the young people that you work with around what's working for them and why they're engaging with your service. But there are so many young people that aren't engaging in your service, and you need to be asking them, why aren't they engaging in your services? What are the gaps for them, and how can you as an organization be responsive to those needs as well? So I guess it's a huge process. We've been really, really lucky here because we are grassroots, and so we have had the ability to be really responsive to young people. And we also have such a huge youth community. We have a great engagement with our community. We have a 32-year history of working on the ground with young people. So we do have those relationships. So I guess it's going to be a different process for every work or every organization, depending on what your role is and what engagement you do have with your community. But ultimately, I think it just goes back to, are you genuinely hearing your young people? Are you not just listening, but are you hearing them? And if they're saying that they need something and your organization isn't providing that, then you need to be asking why.
And I guess that's about being uncomfortable and sitting with those questions, because it's challenging so many different constructs in one kind of way, if that makes sense. And we've been there, we've sat there, and I've sat there plenty of times going, why are we doing this? And I think we as youth workers or youth practitioners or workers in the sector have such a huge responsibility to be questioning. I cannot even count how many times people have said, we know it doesn't work, but we just keep doing it. And I just can't understand that. I get it. I understand the constraints, but why? Like, my question is why? If you know that this is not working, if you go, we're just doing it and it's token, it's tick a box, but that's just how we get our funding, we're never really making social change. We're not making any progress. And I know everyone has different motivations, but that constant, Nat, the system's broken, just deal with it. I just can't deal with that. Like, so I know that that's really challenging and it's really uncomfortable to question, particularly when youth workers really are kind of the bottom feeders most of the time. They're not held with high regard, in
and they're not always
context.
supported.
And they're not supported, And so, that's a really hard thing to ask people to do. But I think it's important that it's those little things, It doesn't mean that young people have to lead your whole organisation. It just means there might be some element that they might lead or make a decision, and then implementing a really strong policy and procedure around that. And, how many times have we gone, all right, let's just ask young people, here's an issue, and we're going to get all the young people in the space and we're going to find out what the solution is going to be for this, or how we're going to, it could be as simple as that, or it could be something as big as changing your whole strategic vision and your purpose for being an organisation, which we've also done. So we've done that scale, and both ways it's hard. It's still a difficult process to go through. From a young person's perspective, Kanan, when, if there's people out there who are working, with young people, what are some of the things that young people want to see to be engaged, to be able to lead? What does that look like?
Well, the young people that I work with, they're interested in music. So for them, it will be something, music based. It might be looking at with other people who make music videos, people who can make them beats, who can mix and master their songs for them, recording and stuff. I'm talking about from the perspective of music. So anything to do with that. People make cover arts as well. Just stuff like that. Being able to network with other like-minded kids or like-minded people in general. So so just being able to work in that and being able to meet those needs, I think, is a really, really vital thing, and that's something that we do provide here. So
So I guess what you're saying is using things that young people are interested in.
And using that to keep them engaged.
And how would, let's say, I'm new to the sector, just got out of TAFE, and I'm working in an organisation managing a youth program or working a youth program. How am I going to find out what young people are interested in? How would I be able to engage? What are some of the things that you would appreciate as a young person, or that you would participate in?
I feel like if you create a program that sparks my interest, and if you were like an engaging person that I can just have a normal talk to, doesn't have to be deep or doesn't have to be anything crazy, but just if I can just talk to you, have a normal conversation with you, then I'm automatically inclined to do your program or be actively involved. So I feel like just having that kind of that interaction is a massive how would I say it? The massive
well, it's everything really, hey. So access and engagement. When we talk about that, it's engagement. There's so many amazing programs for young people, especially in Western Sydney. There's so many programs. Unfortunately, the ability for young people to be able to access and engage that is missing, and so there becomes this gap between this really great program and young people who just kind of can't get there because for whatever reason. And so again, when we're talking about youth-led, it's even around how are you marketing, how are you promoting your program? Are young people involved even in those decisions? We're not talking about big decisions there. We're talking about, do you have social media so young people can access your program? And if you do, are young people helping you decide what that looks like? What does your media content look like? What does your flyer content look like? So it doesn't have to be huge. We're not talking about massive decisions, but like you said, it has to be engaging at a certain point before we can step into the youth-led.
Of course,
and what that looks like.
But obviously, to get them engaged, you need to spark their interest. Why would they want to come here? Why would they want to, help out? Why would they want to, just be in the space in general? And if you just create a good environment where they feel safe, they feel not judged, they feel they're able to just be themselves and really just connect with, the people there, then from there, everything just falls into place.
When that's that youth culture, So we talk about that all the time, We talk about if you want young people to come into a space, that space has to feel like it's inviting and it's warm and it's welcoming, So
also that it's youth friendly. We always talk about how I guess this space is immersed in youth culture, and some people may go, what is youth culture? But youth culture is what you're talking about, Kanan. It's what they're interested in. It's what's trending, and really doing your research around understanding what is going on for young people, what are they engaging with, what are they passionate about, and how can you can you create a program or a space around that? I also wanted to just ask Kanan, if that's okay, do you feel like having a physical space is important?
Yeah, I think having a physical space is the most important thing, because how kids online are gonna go through a lot of sites and a lot of photos and different pages and all that stuff. So what would make it stand out rather than an actual physical space where they can come record, come learn how to do beat making, come play PS4, play pool, basketball, meet other people, like just being able just to be a teenager. And this is a great space in order to do that. So yeah, I answer your question. Yeah, I think having a physical space is a very important thing.
Do you think that there's enough spaces for young people within Western Sydney or within this community even?
That's a hard question, because there are a few places that you can hang out, but a lot of kids just hang out either just at Blacktown, just walking around, chatting and stuff, doing their thing. They can go to the showgrounds, play basketball there, walk around the park and stuff. Come here, vibe out here. But yeah, I feel like no, I feel like there isn't that many. So people tend to create their own, where it might be hanging out at Civic or hanging out, on floor in the car park or something, just doing something to just occupy them.
And I guess
their time.
I guess that's where it has raised concerns, and we have been contacted numerous times around the concerns that when Blyser is closed or there are no other spaces for young people to be safe and to be able to, I guess, participate in their community. And so they are going to places like Civic and On 4 or the station, and there have been a number of concerns around young people being I guess constantly given move on directions or being targeted by police, I suppose, for lack of a better term. And it's been a real point of contention that we've heard and we've experienced here in this space is young people saying, well, when you're closed, where else are we going to go? And particularly when we talk about or we look at some of the experiences of the young people that we are supporting here, that home isn't a safe space, or some of our young people are experiencing homelessness, and so they may be in refuges, but they're kicked out of their refuges during the day, and so they don't have a space to go to, particularly on weekends and on late nights and things like that. And I guess that's why I wanted to ask Kanan around, is that space important? And
I feel like it's a very vital part of just living in this kind of area. And the places that are meant to be youth centers and stuff, or are meant to be for youth, maybe they're not always open during times or don't have flexible hours for young people to come in. So a lot of the ones, like you said, who are out during the day, where do they go? What can they do essentially? So they end up hanging out in these areas and meeting with other people and stuff, and they just do the same. So can't really do much.
And in a sense, they're leading something. Like our young people are leading something, like they're creating their own community. You look at what is the purpose of the community sector, right? The community sector is about, inclusion and participation and all these things. But when you don't give the community the resources, when young people are crying out for that and going like, we want a space. And how many times have we heard this? This is why we have our young leaders who go, I've got this really great idea and all I need is a space. And, either they need to hire a hall, they need insurance, they need all of these things that then put that barrier so they can't lead. So they find another way to lead. And that's generally a way that society deems as like inappropriate.
And then they can be targeted for that, or
of course.
Can experience like discrimination or whatever from the community or from law enforcement or whoever it is by saying no, but you can't do that. It's like, well, why aren't we investing back into community? Why aren't we giving the community or young people the resources to be able to lead their own community and lead solutions to the issues, like I said before, that our sector can't seem to answer. Absolutely.
And when we do talk about youth-led, you're right, we do need to speak about those spaces and the resources available. And we even know, even in a funding context, how many applications are there that are genuinely, truly where young people can put their hand up and say, I've got an idea and I want to run this project. They're very, very, very limited.
Very few and far between.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
usually the only ones that I can kind of recall would be ones that go specific to artists and, in terms of developing their careers. But even to get to that point, that young people need to have access to resources like the studio, like, having access to the film equipment and things like that, so they can actually develop a bit of a following, a portfolio, and they're actually able to create or pursue their passion. And so the only opportunities that I know of are ones where, it's more focused around the arts, which is great, but we need to be looking at, do young people actually have the resources to be able to pursue, their passion for the arts?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to wrap it up now. It's getting close to the hour that we allocated, but I think just some final comments and final words, I guess, if there's one last message that, to anyone that's out there watching about youth-led practice and its importance, what would that be for you?
Two things. One would be get in contact with us, because we would love to share with you, our experiences and our insight. Don't feel like you're alone in this, and we have kind of spent the last 18 months transforming the organisation, and so we've learned a lot of lessons, and so we're really open to sharing that with you. And secondly, it would be to, if you're a youth worker and you genuinely believe in the well-being of young people, you need to do something about it. If you don't agree with something that's happening, or the policies that are being, implemented, or decisions that are being made, and you constantly see young people being failed, do something about it, because young people's lives genuinely depend on you and depend on the position of power that you hold. So, they would be my two messages, would be,
And what about you, Keenan? What's something that, to people out there watching, what about youth-led practice and young people leading, our communities, or leading in terms of making decisions around addressing social problems in our community? What's a message that you want people out there to know?
I think have like an open mind. Don't I guess assume stuff, because a lot of people do have their own story, and they do have a lot of things going on within themselves. So being able to just have an open mind, being able to understand maybe their perspective, and just generally taking time to understand what's happening, and understand the situation of what really happens in Western Sydney. So I think my message would be to have an open mind and approach situations and problems and young people with an open mind.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
I know that I'm blessed to have these conversations every single day, so it's been really great to be able to bring it to you and give you a little bit of an insight into the crazy stuff that happens here at Bison, the things that we talk about. Obviously, the censored version, no one needs to see the uncensored. But our Real Talk sessions will be happening every fortnight from here on. We've got some amazing talks coming up from various young people about addiction, about homelessness, about youth crime, about racism. So please stay tuned. Please follow us on our social media. Please share, please like, and like Alison said, if you have any questions, any comments, any ideas, any criticism, any challenges, please. We always ask for people to challenge the things that we say. Get in contact with us. We'd love to have a conversation with you. But until then, stay safe, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.